Hi, everybody. Mr. Wyatt here. And today we are starting topic 6. Today is our first lesson in, um, in topic 6. And we're talking about percents today and understanding what percent means. And the first thing I want to point out to you is that percent, just as its name suggests, per or out of cent means 100. Just like we have 100 years in a century, or there are 100 cents in a dollar. Cent means 100. So percent literally means per 100. Okay. So when we're finding the percent of something, keep that in mind. We're really talking out of 100. And here I have an example with some different types of toothpaste. What percent of people prefer bright white toothpaste over other brands? So I'm looking here in this picture, and I see I have 3 tubes that are green, and then I have these other tubes that all say bright white, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 tubes here of the bright white toothpaste. So what percent of the people prefer bright white toothpaste? As you can see, we have 7 out of a total of 10 tubes that are bright white toothpaste in this graphic that is representing the popularity of the 2 different brands, or of all the different brands. Okay, so what does that mean? How can I express this as a percent then, if it's 7 out of 10? Well, one way we can do this is by using a line graph. Okay, in this first graph, I have a line that's labeled 0 up through 10. If we go by ones, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7, 8, 9, 10. So 7 out of 10 can be shown on that number line like this. Underneath it, I have an identical number line, but you'll notice instead of, it starts at 0, the same as this first one, but instead of ending at 10 here, it has 100 here, and they don't literally end. There are arrows on number lines showing they go forever. But this one's going by tens: 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So you can see 7 out of 10 is equivalent in value to 70 out of 100. Now remember, that's what percent means. Percent means per 100. So that would be 70%. So you can look at it that way. That's one way you can look at it, is by thinking of these number lines. 7 out of 10 is an equivalent value to 70 out of 100, or 70%. Okay, so that's one way we can do this. Another way that I can show this is by showing it in a grid. Here I have a grid that is 10 high, it's 10 spaces wide, and to represent the 70%, we can shade in 70 of these small squares out of 100 squares, because remember, 7 out of 10, 70 out of 100 are equivalent values. So that's how you can see here each of these individual rows has 7 squares out of 10 that are shaded. You have 7 out of 10 here, you have 7 out of 10 here, and so on. Every single one of the rows, as you work your way down, has 7 of the 10 shaded in. So we have 70 out of 100, or 70%. So that's another way you can represent this percent. And the third way, and this is the most important way, this is the one I'm going to discuss the most today. Another way is to use an equivalent fraction to find the percent. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, to do that, we can set up what's called a proportion. We have 7 out of 10 here. 7 out of every 10 tubes of toothpaste that are purchased are bright white brand. That's the percent of the people that prefer bright white toothpaste. Well, it's actually the fractional portion of people who prefer bright white. What I can do is figure out, all right, what would that equal out of 100 then? Because if you can rewrite it out of 100, then that'll be your percent, since that's what percent means. I'm going to put a P here for that missing value, because once I know that missing value, it's the percent, and percent starts with P. So anyway, to get from 10 to 100, we could just multiply by 10. And in order for these to be equivalent, I also need to multiply the numerator by that same value, 10. And 7 times 10 is 70. So again, we get 70 out of 100, or 70%. Okay, so 3 ways of looking at the same type of problem. All right, so let's try it here. Jane won 9 out of the 10 video games that she played, which means Jane has mad skills. Anyway, what percent of the video games did Jane win? Whenever you have a comparison of numbers like this, you can write it in fractional form. 9 out of 10 video games she won. So I'm going to write it so it looks like a fraction. 9 out of 10 video games that she played, she won. What percent is this? Anytime you want to know the percent, if you can figure out what it is out of 100, then your job is going to be pretty easy here. And 10 happens to be very compatible with 100. All we have to do is multiply by 10. 10 times 10 is 100. Therefore, I also need to multiply the top number, the numerator, by that same amount, 10. 9 times 10 is 90. So it's 90 out of 100, um, which means 90%. So this tells me Jane won 90% of her games. Now that also means she lost 10% of the games. She lost 10% of the time, but we always like to look on the bright side, right? So she won 90% of the games that she played. All right, let's look at another example. Each line segment here represents 100%. You can see this first line segment, here's 100% of it. This next line segment, here's 100% of it. But the segments are not the same length. We are going to use equivalent rates to find the percent or part of each line segment that points A and B represent. So in the first line segment, I see point A right here. And I want to know what percent of that line does it represent. Well, A is at 1 inch. And right here, 100% is at 2 inches. So I could take these lengths, 1 inch. What part of 2 inches is that? I could write it like a fraction. That's it. We're at the 1 inch point out of 2 inches. So what percent would that be out of 100? Because as we've discussed, percent means per 100. And I'll put a P there for the missing percent, okay? And you can see, you probably already can tell what it will be, but I can see 2 does go into 100 if I multiply by 50. And if I do the same in the numerator, 1 times 50 equals 50. So it must represent 50%. Okay, so point A is 50% of that line. It's at the 50% point of that line segment. 1 inch is 50% or half of 2 inches. All right, let's look at the second line segment and let's figure out what percent point B represents. If you look at this, you can see it's at the 1/4 position. We have 1 inch out of 4 inches, and you might know what 1/4 is as a percent. If you do, well, hey, grab it and go. It's 25%, right? Otherwise, we could take that 1 inch for point B out of 4 inches. I'll write that as a ratio, 1 out of 4. And then I just have to figure out what would that equal out of 100, since that's what percent means. It means per 100. Well, again, 4, how do you get from 4 to 100? Well, you can multiply by 25. Same thing up here. Take 1 times 25, which I like multiplying by 1. I get it right almost every time. 1 times 25 is 25 out of 100. So that means point B represents 25% of that number line. Okay, that would be 25% to this 100% here. So try it. Which point represents 50% on the second line segment? Well, let's see. If this is 25% here, point B, then this would be 50%. This is 75%. And then we have 100% over here. So which point represents 50%? Well, point C, which happens to be 2 inches. And 2 inches is 50% or half of 4 inches. Oh my goodness, Mr. Wyatt. Is this really this easy? Yes. All right, so let's look at one more example, example 3 here. You can use percent and you can use mental math to find the length of a line segment. If segment CD, you see that little bar over the top of CD? That's how you represent a line segment. Line segments are parts of lines. You'll notice there are no arrows at the end. It does not go forever in each direction. It starts at C, it ends at D. That's it. It's just a part of a line. So it's a line segment. We represent it like this with a bar over CD. If segment CD represents 10%, what is the length of a line segment that is 100%? And what I can see here is it's matching up with one of these sections, like from this bead to this bead, or from that dot to that dot. That's 4 inches, so I must be going by fours here: 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on. Okay, and this is 10% here, so this would be 20%, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. Okay, so you can see, if you look at this figure, you could take 4 times 10 and figure out what it would be. But I do think it would be easier just to write this as a proportion. 10% is 10 out of 100, because remember, percent means per 100. And so that equals 4 out of what? Well, you can, 10 and 4 are not compatible, but 10 times 10 is 100. If you go vertically here, you could do that same thing here. Take 4 times 10 to find this missing value, and that means it's equal to 40. What I've really done here is I've found out 10 out of 100 is the same thing as 1 out of 10 if you simplify it. Like this section here is 1 link out of 10 links in this entire chain here, okay? So since that's 1/10, you can see 1/10 would equal 4 out of 40 then, wouldn't it? If you simplified this, you'd get 1/10 also. So I think that's the easiest way to do one like this, but you can see it graphically here as well. We are almost done, everybody. If EF represents 200%, here's EF right here, it's 6 inches long. What is the length of line segment that is 100%? Well, 100%, can you use mental math on this one? 100% is like half of 200%. So this little blue line segment must be half of this green line segment. Can you find half of 6 inches? Yeah, 3 inches, right? So we can solve that using mental math. Now, if you wanted to show your work, which is always a good thing to do, you can say, well, how does 200% compare with 100%? You could write a ratio for that. Actually, you could say if 200% is 6 inches, because remember, EF represents 200%. If 200% is 6 inches, I'm putting the percent in the top and the length in inches in the bottom here. Then 100% would equal how many inches? I'll just put a question mark here for the number of inches. And you know what? To get from 200 to 100, these are compatible. I can divide by 2, which means I need to do the same thing here then. Take 6 and divide it by 2, and I get 3 inches that way as well, by writing a proportion using those ratios. All right, one more here and then we'll be done. If segment CD, this one up here, represents 100%, this is 100%, what is the length of a line segment that is 25%? Okay, so CD is 4 inches long. If 4 inches is 100%, I'm going to write it like this: 100% is represented by 4 inches. Then if I want to find a segment that's 25%, well, golly, I just divide by 4 then, don't I? 25% is 1/4, and to find 1/4 of something, you can divide by 4. So that 4 inches, we'd have 1 inch here. So if segment CD represents 100%, then 25% would be 1/4 of that 4 inches, which is 1 inch. That's it for today. I hope that all makes sense. I'll see you tomorrow.